to the second event of the Swig program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice for the 2018-2019 academic year. I see a lot of familiar faces from the first event, most of you from my classes, so it's nice to see you here again. Tonight we're here to learn with guest Rabbi Jaqueline Mates-Muchin. My name is Oren Kroll-Zeldin, and it is my pleasure to serve as the assistant director of this great cutting-edge program. Let me begin by thanking a number of people for their support for making this event possible tonight. Thank you to the Jewish Studies and Social Justice program staff, including Professor Aaron Tapper, who is here tonight, and to Ali Cunningham. Thank you to all the JSSJ, Jewish Studies and Social Justice. I'll just call it JSSJ from now on, save us all a little bit of time. All JSSJ faculty, and also to the faculty of the Theology and Religious Studies department for co-sponsoring this event. Let me take a moment to tell you a little bit about the Swig JSSJ program. There are also some green booklets on that little table at the entrance to the room which describe our work in much greater detail. If you're interested, please take one on your way out. You can also sign up to be put on our listserv. Students are highly recommended because we have events going on all the time. Sign up for our listserv. The sheet is also on the back, similar to where you signed in to get credit for being here tonight. In 1977, Melvin M. Swig and several friends saw the need to establish a Jewish Studies program in the San Francisco Bay Area. For them, the University of San Francisco, a premier Jesuit Catholic institution of higher learning, was the natural home. Not only was this the first endowed chair or Jewish Studies program at any college or university in the Bay Area, but Swig and USF had actually broken ground on a global scale. This was the first Jewish Studies chair or Jewish Studies program at a Catholic university anywhere on planet Earth. In 2008, the program was relaunched as the Swig program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice. Once again, USF and the program broke historical ground, this time in becoming the first academic program worldwide to formally link Jewish Studies with social justice. Including a minor in this field, in the classroom, the program offers a wide range of significant Jewish Studies courses not found in other educational settings, as well as an annual intensive Hebrew language summer program called Hebrew San Francisco Ulpan, and this past summer was our 21st consecutive summer running the program. We have a minor in JSSJ offering an array of courses such as social justice activism and Jews, social justice in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, forgiving the unforgivable, and the ethic of apologies, Jews, Judaisms, and Jewish identities, refugees and justice, funny Jews, queering religion, black Jewish relations, and so many more. Over the past 40 years, literally tens of thousands of students have taken Jewish Studies courses here at USF. Just this year alone, hundreds of students are enrolled in classes in this program. Beyond the classroom, the JSSJ program offers extraordinary events that are free and open to the public, such as this one, which thousands of people from the community have attended over the years. We focus on our events around topics such as Israel-Palestine conflict, Holocaust and genocide studies, and we have 4 annual events. Each fall, we have a speaker series focused on Jewish identities, highlighting the rich diversity of Jews in terms of ethnicity, gender, national sensibilities, sex, sexual orientation, race, and a number of other social identities. Tonight's event is one of the events in that series. Each fall, we also offer an annual human rights lecture, first launched in the 2015-16 academic year when we brought to campus Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire, the head of the United Nations military operations in Rwanda, who refused orders to evacuate the East African nation when the genocide began. Also, each spring we have an annual social justice lecture and an annual social justice Passover Seder. dealing with events such as poverty in Haiti, genocide in Chad, the Sudan, and the Congo, gender justice, and many other topics. Please note that this semester we have one final event, which is on Thursday, October 25th at 6:30 p.m. in this same room. This will be our 4th annual JSSJ Human Rights Lecture, and it's an event entitled Intersex and Human Rights. Intersex people are born with sex characteristics that don't fit typical definitions of male and female. In many countries, intersex children are subjected to repeated surgery and treatment to try to change their sex characteristics and appearance, causing terrible physical, psychological, and emotional pain, and violating their rights. Founder of the Transgender Clinic of San Francisco, MD of Family Medicine, and Human Rights Watch researcher, Dr. Swig will speak about the failure of the law to protect intersex children from unethical medical surgeries here in the United States. There are many ways to change the world for the better, a multitude of pieces to the puzzle regarding what each of us can do to help move and even transform the world to its potential, which is called Tikkun Olam in the Jewish tradition. Through the Swig JSSJ program, we believe that education is the best long-term way to create systemic change. Whether one has the time to take a semester-long course or for a mere few hours to hear from a single speaker, education is fundamental to making our world better, paramount in shining the spotlight on the margins, on oppressed communities who are mistreated merely because of their race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or another social identity altogether. Which leads us to tonight's speaker. Tonight's speaker is Rabbi Jaqueline Mates-Muchin, the senior rabbi at Oakland's Temple Sinai. Prior to her service at Temple Sinai, Rabbi Mates-Muchin served as the assistant rabbi in Buffalo, New York. She was ordained at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in New York, having received awards for liturgy, history, Bible, homiletics, religion, and humanities. She also received awards for pastoral excellence and for excellence in service of a congregation. Her thesis, entitled The Analect of Confucius and its Parallel in Early Rabbinic Thought, was a reflection of her Chinese and Jewish traditions. She is the first Chinese-American rabbi in history. Rabbi Mates-Muchin has been active in the leadership of East Bay Jewish Life, serving as the immediate past president of the East Bay Council of Rabbis. She strongly believes in the importance of supporting and serving the greater community as well, and works with the Oakland Fire Department as a volunteer chaplain amongst other civic and interfaith involvement. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Jaqueline Mates-Muchin to
Thank you so much, and I want to thank Professors Kroll-Zeldin and Tapper for inviting me, and for all of you for being here this evening and allowing me to share a little bit about my story and my family's story with all of you. Chinese and Jewish. Oops, wait. Okay, which arrow? Do we? There we go. Okay, so this first picture is a model of the synagogue in Kaifeng, China. And this model is in the Diaspora Museum in Israel. And the Jews of Kaifeng, they came to China somewhere, people estimate, between 900 and 1200 CE, so about 1,000 years ago. And it was a long-standing community. Slowly, they became so integrated, they were given specific last names, so that even to this day, the families that were identified as Jewish can still be recognized. that it has, for a long while, it petered out and was very, very, it was not an active community. It was terribly impoverished, and only recently has there been a resurgence. And in fact, one of the members of the community has recently been ordained a rabbi through a program in Israel. So all of this to say this has nothing to do with me. But I've learned a lot about the Kaifeng Jewish community because over time, when people find out that I'm Chinese and Jewish, one of the first questions they ask me is, oh, are you descended from the Jews of Kaifeng? Which I say, no. And then they say, oh, because I learned about the Jews of Kaifeng, this. Which is, right, just is one of those things, as I'm sure you know. I mean, whether it's you're Jewish or you're some other group, right, that somebody learns that and they realize, oh, you must know this other person that I know on the complete other side of the country because you're both of the same group. So these are Chinese Jews from China. My story is a very different one. I'm an Ashkenazi Jew. And this is the synagogue in Vienna, Austria. And this is the synagogue where my grandparents and great-grandparents belonged. My family was very integrated into Austrian society. One of my great-grandfathers was in the cavalry, in the Austrian cavalry. We had someone somewhere back there who was knighted at some point, very much a part of Austrian society, until, of course, we weren't. And when the Germans came to Austria, the Austrians did very quickly what it took the Germans to do, many years to do, in terms of isolating the Jews, and many of them fled. And so my family was able to flee as well. They went first to Switzerland, and then to England, and then came to the United States. So this is a picture of the inside, this is a picture of the outside, which I included only because you can't tell from the outside that it's a synagogue. So even though there is a rich Austrian and in particular Viennese Jewish history, that the synagogue itself was also not something that was recognizable from the street. On the other side of my family, my Chinese side of the family, these beautiful young children are standing in front of a building that my mom lived in for the first couple of years of her life. It's on Waverly Place here in San Francisco, Chinatown. So my great-grandparents came to this country, and most of them were very young. One of my great-grandmothers was like 8 or 9, and the other one was about 18. Both of my grandparents then were born here. One of them was born in San Francisco. My grandfather was born in Sacramento, and my mom was born here as well. Many times, also, when people find out that I'm Chinese and Jewish or that I'm Eurasian, people will assume that my mom has only recently come over. So I always think it's an important point to recognize actually that my mom's family was very well established here. And my father was actually the one who had the immigrant experience. My father only spoke German until he was 5. And then one of the neighbors realized, hey, this kid should probably be in kindergarten. And then my grandparents sent him, and that was his first very abrupt introduction to American life and to the English language. My mom speaks a little Chinese, but not much. These kids it's their nieces and nephew and my son, and they were trying to mimic a picture of my mom sitting in that very same spot. Well over 60 years ago. None of them got it right, but it's a cute picture. So my parents met in the 1960s in Berkeley. They were both students at UC Berkeley. So my dad grew up in Los Angeles. Again, my mom grew up here in San Francisco. So my unique Chinese Jewish story is really an all-American story. It is the unique situation here, not only in the United States, but really here in the Bay Area, that created a situation wherein the two of them could meet and fall in love and get married. They were married in 1966. The anti-miscegenation laws nationally were only outlawed in 1967. So when they got married, they drove across country and they drove through states where it was still illegal to marry somebody who was of a different race. And in 1967, all of those laws were abolished. So in some ways, they were pioneers in that respect. On the other hand, they never set out to make any statements like that. They were really just, right, they met and fell in love and wanted to get married. My mom was not raised Jewish. She decided to convert before my parents were married. She was active in a Presbyterian community, and when they started talking about having a life together, she realized that it was very crucial to my father's family and to their history that they were Jewish. To her family, it was very crucial that they were Chinese, and that her very ecumenical theology really worked within Judaism. So she converted to Judaism at that time. And that's a picture of my family. So we're all raised Jewish. We were raised at a synagogue named Shearith Israel that's nearby. I'm sure some of you know of it. We not only are Chinese and Jewish, but there are a lot of us. There's 5 of us. So we were a family that people recognized for multiple kinds of reasons. As I said, it was not anybody's intention that we would challenge some of the way that people understood what it meant to be Jewish, except that by our very existence, for some people we did do that and started to sort of change the face of the American Jewish world. So people often ask me, and I think it's actually something that's not specific to being Chinese and Jewish, but it's something that is more just about being biracial or having multiple groups that you belong to, that people will also often ask me questions about my multiple identities, or they will ask me questions about how does being Chinese and Jewish, how does that conflict, or where does it butt heads, or which one's more important to you, or because you're a rabbi, it must mean that you chose Judaism over being Chinese, right? So I imagine that sometimes people have in their minds that this is kind of what it is like to belong to two peoples and to two communities, that it's something that is very divided, and that it's something that often causes conflict. In my family, however, it was more like this. This is a picture from my bat mitzvah. It was actually, both aspects of our identity were very well integrated. Our family all got along. Obviously, there's differences in family culture, but some of that is also just differences in family culture and not necessarily about race or about religion. My parents were very, very intentional about the way that they raised us, knowing that we were a part of both traditions and of both peoples. They knew that people would say things to us that might make us uncomfortable or that might be problematic. And I'll share a few of what those things are in a moment. And what they did was they warned us. They said that, in a Jewish setting, somebody might say that you're not really Jewish because your mom's Chinese, or you're not really Jewish because your mom converted, or you're Chinese and that's a weird thing. And if they say that to you, then you should know that they are wrong and that you are Jewish and that is something that is really special. As a matter of fact, to be descended from 2 ancient, rich cultures is very, very special. So if somebody comes to you with saying something like this that could be insulting or problematic, you need to know who you are and that they can't challenge you. And I think that was really an important piece for all of us, so that when those kinds of things happen, more in the Jewish community, the Chinese community reaction to being biracial was a little bit different for us. But that it was something that we felt very strongly. So sometimes it hurt and it was difficult, but it never made us challenge who we were. We never had a question about who we were, because our parents were very good at being very intentional about that when we were early on. So this is a picture from my bat mitzvah. And my bat mitzvah celebration itself was my bat mitzvah service was like every other bat mitzvah service that you would see at Shearith Israel. There was nothing that was different about it. However, our celebration was a little bit different, because that was something that was much more particular to our family. So in every one of our bar and bat mitzvah celebrations, we had lion dancers as a part of that celebration. And that was a way for us to be able to bring those 2 things together without changing the nature of either one of them, but that bringing them together in a way that was appropriate and meaningful enabled us to express who we were in multiple kinds of ways, and express the fact that there was a uniqueness. We recognized there was a uniqueness about our sense of belonging and connection to these multiple symbols and multiple ways of celebrating. This is my brother's bar mitzvah. So again, I'm the only rabbi in my family. But all of us have a very similar kind of a perspective and understanding about the roles of Judaism in our lives, and the way that Judaism and that being Jewish and being Chinese meshes together for us. So we consider ourselves very, very fortunate in that way. And I think, again, a lot of it had to do with our parents giving us tools to deal with what they knew we would encounter, as opposed to reacting to the kinds of things that happened to us. Even choosing to live in San Francisco was something that was very conscious. Of course, my mom was also from San Francisco, but there was also opportunities to live in other parts of California. But their sense was that in San Francisco that we would find greater comfort in our own, in being biracial, that there would be more families that we would know and be more comfortable that way. So here are some of the questions that people used to ask me. I don't know if everyone can read them, but I'll share them. How did you get to be Jewish? Wait, are you Jewish? But I thought your mom was Chinese. When did you convert? Were you adopted? Those two actually came about a lot in rabbinical school, where people would ask me if I was adopted. That had never come up before rabbinical school. These are just fun. You look like you might be kind of Asian, or no offense, but your hair looks kind of Asian. And I'm sure that there are these kinds of things that I'm sure other people in the room can really relate to, right? With people, again, some of this is not specific to being Chinese and Jewish, it's specific to being biracial. And people having that sense that they can ask you questions, and it's their right to ask you questions. If they think that there's something that they want to understand about you, that they feel like they can ask you and put you in a difficult position. So the nature of these questions did change once I went to rabbinical school, because people no longer asked me if I was Jewish. Sometimes there were questions about, how I came to be Jewish. But there were other kinds of instances that happened, and I'll share just a few rabbi pictures. When I was a student, I was a second-year student, and I went to a pulpit in Cleveland. And the Cleveland Jewish newspaper had interviewed me because, that's, a new student is coming to town to help with services. And I told them that I was Chinese and Jewish. And they found that to be interesting. When I was in the receiving line after services, and I was, saying Happy New Year to everyone as they left, one woman said to me, you're a nice little Chinese girl. No matter what anybody says, you can be just as Jewish as the rest of us. Now, what I think is interesting about that is she was trying to pull me in, right? She was trying to make a connection, but did it in such a way that was, that did the exact opposite of what she had hoped that it would do. So I'll leave it on this slide for one more moment. So I think for me, as a rabbi, there were different times where I was interested in engaging in the conversation than others. And actually, as a part of this reaction to what had happened in Cleveland, I stopped leading with it. Right? Nobody had even met me before they published this news story in the Cleveland Jewish paper, right? So I stopped leading with it. I stopped kind of telling people right away that that's what it was. I told a story for one of the first sermons that I gave here in Oakland, a story about me when I was in college at Hillel. And I was dating somebody that also went to Hillel, and though we didn't meet there. And there was one Friday night we were having a conversation around interfaith marriages and interfaith relationships. And at some point at the end of the night, the rabbi pulled my boyfriend, now husband of 21 years, aside and said, what are you and Jackie going to do? And as he related to me this story later, I was like, what is he talking about, right? I didn't even understand it, but he understood that to mean, and his answer was, Jackie's Jewish. And then the rabbi was like, oh, right? That it was, okay, now he understood in a totally different context. Which was an interesting experience for me, and it was a hurtful experience for me in a lot of ways, because I had been very active in Hillel, and I thought that, right, in terms of my relationship with this rabbi and those kinds of things, that, was his presumption that I was only, throwing myself into this because my boyfriend was Jewish. We, talked about it, and we became very close as a result of being able to kind of work through some of that. But I shared this story as a rabbi, and I decided not to use my name, like my perspective. I called it something else. I changed the race. I, kind of did it in a different way. And at the time, it was because I was feeling like I don't want it to be about me, right? I don't want it to be like I'm being defensive or, I'm complaining about things. Though I think as time goes on, I think the more I was worried that it was about me, then it became more about me than it really had to be. And as time went on, what I wanted to make sure of as this conversation and about the racial diversity and the diversity within the Jewish community, as the conversation went on, I wanted to help to be able to shape it more than I had. And what I also realized is that how powerful it is for some members of my congregation because I'm Chinese. And I can say that because that's through no fault of my own, right? There are people who find out that I'm Chinese. There's a Chinese rabbi in Oakland, and they join my congregation because of it. Because there's that sense that they're right, but because of their own family, because of their own concerns about feeling like they can connect and fit in, that it's been something that has been powerful for some people. In terms of shaping the conversation, both in the Reformed Jewish movement and in other ways, there's a lot of conversation, a lot of talk right now as if this is something new, right? This is something we're kind of just discovering. That it's only now we realize, right, we have to start welcoming people of all different kinds of races within the Jewish community because they're starting to come, right? And for me, that is very, it makes me very angry because this has been my family situation for 52 years, right? As long as my parents have been, even longer, right, in terms of their being together. This is not something that's new. And not only for my family, but it's not new within the Jewish story either, that we have always become a part of the people that we live amongst and started to reflect the way that they look as well. That's why there are Indian Jews who are Indian, and there's Moroccan Jews who are Moroccan, and there's Jews from Kaifeng who are Chinese. That this has always been a part of the Jewish story. And that what we are looking at right now is the American Jewish community becoming reflective of the greater community that is around us. And we are not in the process now, we're not in the position now of welcoming people in. We are in the position of recognizing who we already are and being able to talk about it in a different kind of a way. So the Kaifeng story is not my story, but this is my story, right? That this is from the Pew Report 2017. And it basically said, right, since Loving versus Virginia, and it's no longer illegal to marry somebody of a different race, this is, right, the path of interracial marriage in this country. And so the average is about 10% from the country. From the same report, they say that our region, San Francisco, the interracial marriage rate is at about 26%. The federation, the local federation in San Francisco, just did a demographic study in all of the Bay Area. And one of the things that they found was that 25% of Bay Area households include a respondent or a spouse who is of non-European American descent or mixed descent. Which means, right, from 25% here and 26% intermarriage from the Pew Report, that we are exactly a reflection of the community that we're living amongst within the Jewish community. And of course, that's only the kind of diversity that comes from interracial marriage. That doesn't include people who decide to convert to Judaism who are not of European descent. I would say anecdotally, I'd say about half of my conversion students are non-European American. So that's also a product of being here in this country and the diversity and the possibility that we have for engaging with one another, that we understand and learn about different communities and decide and can choose to join them and to be a part of them. So I just wanted to give you a picture. This is my immediate family, because this is me, my siblings, their spouses, my parents, my husband, his siblings, their spouses, and parents, and of course everybody's kids as well. So every single person in the youngest generation here, I would say is of mixed race or mixed ethnicity. On this side here, right, which is the folks who are of European descent, I have one sister-in-law who's Swedish and Norwegian, and one sister-in-law who is English. So their kids are right, a mix of various European ethnicities. And on this side, we are Chinese, we are Japanese, we are Filipino, we are Mexican, and we're little daughters of the American Revolution, even too, mixed in there. So to me, this is a reflection of what the American Jewish community is and what the American Jewish community will continue to become. That my identity is really wrapped up in the American Jewish identity. And I think it's so exciting for us now to be realizing and recognizing that what we are creating is a unique Jewish stream. That right where we often talk about being Ashkenazi Jews, but the Ashkenazi Jewish world is in a lot of ways a world that we left behind in Europe. That what we are doing now and what we are building now is a unique form and a unique branch of Judaism. And we've been doing that for a long time, but now as our racial diversity continues to increase, it is much more apparent that that is what we are and that is who we are. That as an American Jewish community, we are becoming something that is unique and something that is special. And so to me, that's an exciting thing and an exciting time. Thank you.
So,
Sit down.
Let's go sit down.
That's my son's bar mitzvah, by the way. My second son, who's kind of in the middle there with the pink shirt.
So thank you. Thank you for now. Thank you for coming, and thank you for this explanation of your identity and for sort of complexifying for us what it means to be Chinese American Jewish rabbi at a congregation here in the Bay Area. I'm going to open up the conversation and ask a number of questions, and then we'll open it up for everyone else to engage as well. If that sounds good to you. Yeah, sounds good. So, I just want to ask you a few more questions about your Jewish journey, so to speak. How and why did you decide to go to rabbinical school and become a rabbi?
I was a religious studies and cultural anthropology double major, and I thought I was actually headed to academia. And my father suggested rabbinical school. He doesn't remember suggesting it, and I don't remember the context anymore under which he suggested it. But with a few conversations and within a few months, I decided to go to rabbinical school. And I thought I would be a rabbi first, and then I would get a PhD and become an academic. And then in school, I kept taking rabbinic positions that would make it so that I could say for sure that I knew that I wasn't interested in congregational life. But then job after job after job, and as I got to the end of it, I realized that this is a very rewarding place to be in life, and a very privileged place to be able to spend so many significant moments with people, to be invited into their lives, to be able to experience those moments with them. And I still get to study and learn and that piece of it as well. And so here we are.
And teach as well. So I want to ask you about that. In some of this work that you do, I imagine that you counsel lots of different people in your community, including interracial and interfaith couples. In what ways do you counsel them based on your own experiences and based on the fact that we are living in the Bay Area, which might be a different place? You might counsel them differently based on the reflection of who the Jewish community is here as opposed to in other parts of the world.
One of the things that I usually share too is growing up in San Francisco, we were one of three overtly mixed race families, right, of our 1,000 families or something like that. In our preschool now, I would say, we're at least, 10 to 15, well, there's a really good mix, right, 10, 15% or so that is multiracial, biracial. So already the world is changing very, very dramatically. So I do share that there may be things that they encounter, and sometimes there are going to be things that are said and shared, and they want to be prepared for them and understand what their responsibility is in responding, which is none, right? When people ask you a difficult question and they put you on the spot, you have no responsibility whatsoever to answer that question. But you feel on the spot, right? But if we practice, right? If we know that there may be people who will come and say something to you that could be obnoxious, and you practice what you're going to say, when you get to that moment, you feel, right, it's like a fire drill. You're ready to be able to respond to those things. So sometimes there's those kinds of conversations. That also comes up when people are raising kids and talk about, right, what is that going to feel like, or what is the experience of my kids going to be in my community or in the Jewish community. And I think that is ultimately what I learned from my parents is, right, to recognize that to know who you are, to be as clear as possible with your understanding of who you are, and not let other people challenge that for you.
So I can attest to the factual nature of the statement about the preschool, because in the interest of full disclosure, my daughter goes to the preschool at Temple Sinai, and it is a wonderful place. So San Francisco, you talked about how your parents made the conscious decision to stay in San Francisco and to raise you in San Francisco. And you also you mentioned some of the experiences you had, or one of the experiences you had in Cleveland, but you're also a rabbi in Buffalo. You spent time in Santa Barbara, and those places all have unique Jewish histories, but San Francisco's is different than all of them. What was it specific to the Jewish history and Jewish cultures and communities here, and the Chinese history here in San Francisco, that made this the right place for your parents to decide to live, other than the other places in California said there were options?
It was mostly actually intentional around the Chinese history. And the Chinese, and my family is very much a part of the Chinese history of San Francisco, and we see ourselves that way, and feel very connected to San Francisco and San Francisco history that way. I don't actually know if they knew a lot about the history of the Jewish community. They knew that there were significant numbers of congregations here. There was a day school. We actually went to Brandeis Hillel for a year or two, some of us. And so I think that they were actually less focused on the specifics of the San Francisco Jewish community than the Chinese community. I will say, living in Buffalo, that we lived in Buffalo for 3 years. We knew we wanted to come back. My husband's family was also from Los Angeles, so everyone was in California. What I found actually extremely difficult in Buffalo was teaching my kids what it means to be Chinese. And I could manage within our congregation the Jewish part, but it was very difficult without a greater Jewish community, a greater Chinese community to teach them what that meant. So that was actually even one of my interests also in coming back to the Bay Area.
So it's different though in Oakland than it is here in San Francisco. So how do you navigate that with your own children being in Oakland, which still has a rich Chinese and Jewish history, but different than here in San Francisco?
So my kids' Chinese identity, or the aspects of their identity that are Chinese specifically, are mostly around my family. So it's around the holidays that we spend with my immediate family, as well as we have a large extended family of cousins and aunts and uncles and things like that. So a lot of that experience is sort of in that familial community, which are things we couldn't participate in when we were far away.
Right.
My children are the least diverse of all of my nieces and nephews, because my husband is Ashkenazi, so my children are 3/4 Ashkenazi and 1/4 Chinese. So they are the least actually diverse of any of the nieces and nephews.
It's interesting and compelling for numerous reasons, one of which in the Jewish American community, there's so much effort put into Jewish continuity, ensuring that people will raise their children Jewish. And so one of the fears of intermarriage, meaning interfaith marriage, is that what happens to the next generation. The script is a little bit flipped in your own experience in your own family, is that you need to struggle to hold on to the Chinese element of your kids' identities, which is also a marginalized identity here in the United States, and putting together the Jewish and the Chinese piece. Now you have to deal with both Jewish continuity and Chinese continuity, and that's a unique experience. One of the things we teach in this program is that we try to challenge Ashkenazi hegemony in in some of the similar ways that you did in saying, look, there are Jews in Morocco who are Moroccan Jews, Jews in Kaifeng who are Chinese Jews, and the hybrid identities of Chinese and Jewish doesn't always reflect the fact that Ashkenazi Jewish is also a hybridized and marginalized identity. In other words, when we think of non-Ashkenazi communities, those are what we focus on as Chinese American rabbi. I want to go be part of that synagogue, as opposed to Ashkenazi Jewish rabbi. I want to be part of that synagogue.
Although I'm an Ashkenazi.
So that's the
right?
question, right?
Yeah.
So when people come to you, you embody the challenges of both this hybridized non-Ashkenazi identity in being Chinese, but you're an Ashkenazi Jew. How do you navigate that? How do you explain that to people who come specifically because they want to be in a community with a Chinese American rabbi?
So to be fair, most people don't think of it as, or haven't thought about it as in-depth as you do. So I think for a lot of people, right, it's this sense that, that my kids are also biracial, or my kids also, I worry that my kids are going to feel connected. And if we, I come and it's me, but I also bring, multiple of my siblings also belong to the synagogue. So I have this huge Asian family that I bring with me pretty much everywhere. So it changes the feel for most people. It's interesting because when you originally talked about that with Ashkenazi hegemony, and it is what I think actually this is an Ashkenazi story, right? This is an Ashkenazi Jewish story because that's where my Judaism comes from. It comes from the Ashkenazi culture, it comes from the Ashkenazi gene pool. That's it. It isn't anything else unless it is fully American. And that's perhaps why when I try to think about it, that we have sort of in our mind a specific thing that Ashkenazi Jews must be, but once Ashkenazi Judaism transferred itself to the United States, it becomes something totally different entirely. So in some ways, it's again, it's right, the myth of what an Ashkenazi Jew is that actually I'd like to break apart, because Ashkenazi Jews become all kinds of different things. It isn't that one, kind of image or model that many people have in their minds. I want to also just mention one other thing that in terms of the interfaith marriage, and again, my parents had an interfaith relationship, but my mom did convert to Judaism. And she was the one who thought it was important that her children be Jewish because of its connection to my father's family. And that is something that I see all the time, that we have people who come into Jewish families in various kinds of ways, and some convert and some don't. But there is a sense of the significance and the importance of what this means for the next generation. And I think for me, as a rabbi, with some of the things that rabbis sometimes struggle with in terms of, what does it mean, right? What is interfaith marriage doing to the American Jewish community or to Judaism, which is a topic that, that comes up. I feel like it enriches it. That ultimately what we are trying to do here is to uplift the values and a sense of belonging and a sense of peoplehood and a perspective on the world and on the universe that is worthwhile and helps to connect people, for generations back and connects people generations forward. That's what Judaism is. I think in some ways, actually, Judaism is very much a tradition that has a foot in multiple worlds. That there has often been a kind of a struggle with, on the one hand, you're in the world amongst the people that you're living with, and at the same time, you're sort of in a Jewish world that kind of puts you in a minority and puts you in a different place too. And I actually think being biracial gives me that perspective, right? So some of the things that are highlighted based on that perspective of having a foot in multiple places is a different sense of compassion and a different sense of understanding, and therefore a different sense for the need for justice. And to me, it seems like having very close family members who look different from me, who are different religions than me, who have very different practices, means to me something very different. I don't fear what that could be. I don't fear that we could all be in the same family, and that makes sense, and not change each other, but recognize each other, and then it broadens, right, the horizon. So you saw how many kids were in that picture. All of my Chinese cousins have probably, will be to attend more bar mitzvahs than half of the Jews in the country. So there's a different sense for them of an openness and understanding of what that our tradition is, as well as me a different kind of understanding for their religious traditions and their family traditions as well. So to me, I think it has the possibility to really enrich not only enrich the Jewish community in a lot of ways, but in particular because I actually think it highlights some of the significant pieces that Judaism tries to teach.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's open it up if you have questions.
Do I have to? First of all, thank you. This is wonderful, and the first time for me that I've heard from a Chinese rabbi in sort of setting before, so thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say, first of all, this is like a strangely, let's say, serendipitous week. I was at a Sukkot event a couple of nights ago. That was also an autumn moon festival celebration, so we can Chinese like moon cake, and it's for the first time. That was also the first time for me. I had never really attempted to combine the celebration of the two cultures at the same time. So this is a powerful week for me. And the question that I have for you is, when people are struggling with their identities as mixed race or mixed ethnicity Jews, and they come to you, I was wondering if there are any specific texts or stories that you call upon. I am particularly curious about Jewish texts, or otherwise, that come to mind for you.
So when we left Egypt, in the book of Exodus, that it says that the Israelites left with an Arab crowd, a mixed multitude. That it already, right from the start there, where we kind of make our journey into the wilderness and figure out who we're going to be, already there's a recognition that it was a mixed multitude. It was not a single group of people, but rather people who were connected because they felt a pull and the significance of what this tradition could teach. So there's that piece that I think is always very important. One of my favorite texts is that's actually repeated over 30 times in the Torah in various ways, but the one way that it is captured in Exodus 23, it says that you shall not oppress the stranger, for you know the soul of the stranger, having been strangers in the land of Egypt. Strangers isn't a perfect translation of the word ger, right? Because strangers suggest that they're somebody that you don't. It's somebody that you don't know. The Israelites were in Egypt for 400 years. These were not people that were unknown to the Egyptians, right? But a stranger is somebody, therefore the ger is somebody that you kind of push off and is marginalized. And so there's that recognition, as well as that within our communities there are always those that we see that we want to see as strangers, even though they're not, right? That it is such an important piece within our text to understand who are the folks who are on the margins, and how do we make sure that we don't keep them there. How do we make sure that we treat people based on our own understanding of what it means to be marginalized as Jews? How do we make sure that we embrace everybody?
Hi, I also wanted to thank you for coming. As another fellow Chinese Jew, this was probably the first time I've ever felt as close to 100% represented ever. And I wanted to address the Chinese Moon Festival at Sukkot on the same night. Last year, Alana Kaufman was here for her talk, and I shared my moon cake with her after the event. But I had two questions. First, starting with, I wanted to ask maybe the story of how your Chinese family got here, because you said you're third generation American, is that correct?
Third generation born, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe just like the circumstances that brought them here, and how they got to San Francisco. And then the second question, when people find out I'm Chinese and Jewish, immediate place they go to is, oh, you must be so good with money, or you're so cheap if they're not being as nice. And so I wanted to ask, you know, in that perspective, what kind of values do you think are aligned between the two cultures, the two individual cultures, and how that has shaped how your, you know, the lens you see life through?
Thank you. So I wrote Dr. Kroll-Zeldin mentioned I wrote my thesis on the intellects of Confucius, and it's parallel in early rabbinic thought, which is Pirkei Avot specifically, for the ethics of the fathers, for those of you who might be familiar with it. There's two quotes there that are really significant. That in the Jewish text it says, do not do unto others what you do not want to have done to you. All the rest is commentary. Go and learn it. And Confucius says, you know what? I'm confusing them a little bit. The Jewish text is what is hateful to you, do not do to others. And Confucius has a similar kind of a thing that sounds like the golden rule, except it's not the golden rule, because it's not do unto others as you want to have them to do unto you, but it's do not do unto others what you do not want to do unto you. So I wish I brought the slide. It actually is very, very parallel kind of ways that it's set it up, and both are given in the negative that way. I think that if we look at a lot of different teachings, and especially the ones that deal with ideals and values, that there's a lot aligned between Chinese and Jewish texts. I think that if we study those texts in any people's, they're actually very much aligned. Those two texts in particular came out of difficult times, and people were imagining a world that could be better and how people should treat each other based on that. And I think if we look at texts from around the world in different cultures, we find a lot of similar kinds of expressions. My parents always said that education was a big thing from both of their families, right? That was very, very significant. Family values was also something that was very significant. Did they get that from being just Chinese and just Jewish? I don't know, right? I mean, that's also their families, and not every Chinese family has those values. Not every Jewish family has those values. But for them, those were always the things that they really felt were aligned. I have to tell you, so my parents are both physicians. I have one brother who's a physician, and his wife is a physician as well. So that's one commonality. They do like it when Chinese and Jews like it when your kids become physicians. And somebody had asked me when I was going into rabbinical school, like, oh, what are you doing next? And I said, I'm going to rabbinical school. And she said, oh, you're joining the family business. And I was like, what are you, I was like, no, not medical school, rabbinical school. And then she was like, oh, and then not as interested in continuing that conversation. But another kind of way that it's aligned. My Chinese family history is a little bit fuzzier. There are, my grandmother's mother came over when she was 18. She was already married. We actually don't know her first name, because at that point she was Mrs. her husband, and so my grandmother didn't know her name. My grandfather's grandmother came over when she was a young kid, 8 or 9. So my grandmother's father, we think, may have been a cook at some point, may have it to do with something with the railroads, but it's a little fuzzy. It kind of depends on it. We all try to sort of match the stories that we've heard at different times to sort of understand it. But what's very interesting about my family too is that both of my grandparents at different points went back to China to go to high school, and that's something that is also an interesting and from what I understand, that wasn't super common necessarily, but then so that it suggests something about their their ability to be able to do that, to go back and forth. Yeah.
So, thank you for speaking. So going back to the Jewish continuity piece, so how can we sort of balance the value that we and our community places on Jewish continuity with the prejudice against interfaith marriages that we see? anecdotally, people, my non-Jewish friends, or oh, he doesn't want to date me because I'm not Jewish, yada yada, and that's prejudice. So I'm sort of stuck between, on the one hand, I sort of explained it, our grandparents would roll over in their grave if we didn't, have Jewish babies or whatever. So how can we sort of balance those with the sheer prejudice of discriminating against non-Jews?
Well, I think it comes from a fear of continuity, and Jews are not the only ones who are concerned about that, right? I mean, in terms of, our kids marrying people of different races or different religions or those kinds of things, right? That's something that's actually shared amongst many peoples. I think our focus needs to shift from who people decide to marry to how they want to set up their household and raise their children. It doesn't matter who you want to bring in with you. That's fantastic. I really think that ultimately, right, to bring in new thoughts and new energy, because I will say a lot of new energy comes from people who choose Judaism or choose Jewish life by coming into a Jewish family as adults, have a very different kind of energy than a lot of Jews who are raised in Jewish households. That's great. What I want to inspire people to do is to raise children who are Jewish. So or to teach other people about Judaism, or to invest in Jewish life and Jewish community. That, to me, it needs to be the shift in focus. Because I agree that, when you look at my congregation, people still come to me and will kind of whisper, just so you know, my spouse isn't Jewish, right? And I feel like whispering, that's about 85% of the congregation, right? But everybody thinks it's something that's kind of, right, shameful, or something that's really just about them. I think the institutionalized Jewish community needs to stop telling people that interfaith marriage is a bad thing, because if we're talking to the people who are in our pews, and how amazing is it that they're still here, even though we keep pointing to people and saying, you're the reason that Judaism's dying. And they still come and belong to our congregations. It's right. It's not a positive thing. There's laws all throughout Judaism that talk about why we shouldn't marry out of our people, and I think we have that many laws because Jews have done it all the time. This is a part of who we are, right? To me, that's exactly why that when we're looking at becoming a part of the peoples that we live amongst, that this is ultimately how we do it. We become a part. People join us, and we become a part of the people that we live amongst. The key is to inspire people to believe that Judaism is so important that is something that they continue throughout their life, and that they want to implant that commitment to people that they teach, or to children that they raise. That is what we need to refocus on. And I think that points back to us, the institutionalized Jewish community, that if we are not inspiring that in people, that means that we need to be shifting how we think about things and how we focus things.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to thank you for speaking. Like everyone else, I found your talk really, really informational and such a unique sort of journey into where you are now. Sort of related to that, if I could just sort of stumble through this. Obviously, you went to rabbinical school, you finished rabbinical school, and not everyone who graduates from rabbinical school stays as a rabbi. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what motivates you, even years after you've graduated from rabbinical school and you've studied and you still continue to study, what motivates you and gives you that energy to continue doing the work that you do, given everything politically and the hard times that we're living in right now? How do you do it? How do you stay where you are and continue with such grace and effort?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think I lived a very privileged life because I get to be with people in moments that are really significant and meaningful, whether those are the happiest moments in people's lives or the most difficult moments in people's lives. That is very real. That, right, family bonds and the significance of family and relationships with other people, I get to delve into those things that are the most significant aspects of our lives, and deal with the purpose of our lives all the time. People will ask me, bar bat mitzvah, we have at least one a week. sometimes, right, they do two together. And does it get boring? I mean, it's the exact same service, right? We do the exact same thing. And it never gets boring to me because I sit right on the bima on the stage and I look at the faces of the parents and what this means to them as they watch their children grow and are thinking about, the past 13 years and thinking about what's next to come. I think that when that gets boring to me, when seeing the emotion and how moved people are to be at this point in life, when that gets boring, then that's the time to move on. Because I think that's what, I feel like that's what I get to do, that's what I get to see all the time. In terms of the world around us, I think actually people are, in my community, are more interested in hearing about what Judaism has to say about life and how we should live it now than they have ever been throughout my career. Because I think you get to a point where right, there's conflict and there's this feeling of people are on edge no matter where they fall on the political spectrum. And people want to be reminded of what's important. So I actually think in some ways that I'm not teaching anything different than I ever taught before, but I think people are hearing it differently these days just because of what we're experiencing. Thanks.
Hi, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming and telling your story and really giving us an insight on your journey and where you've been and where you're going. I wanted to ask, I am Jewish, but I was raised in a secular household. And only recently, the past 2-3 years, am I starting to delve into the theology and practice of Judaism. And I've found, like you said, the people who practice Judaism later in life, as opposed to being born into it and raised through it their whole life, have a much different energy. Can you specify or give some examples as to the differences between the approach that either converts or people who are rediscovering their religion have, in contrast to people who are raised through Judaism and kind of have been in it and been surrounded by it their whole lives?
Yes, as long as we all recognize that these are gross overgeneralizations, right? And that any given person is going to be a very different and individual kind of story. So given that, there is a lot of the adult Jewish community who did not stay engaged actively in Jewish life past bar bat mitzvah, or some even past high school. And so a lot of what their sense of what Judaism is the stuff that is relevant when you are 13 years old or even up into 18 years old. So without delving in and asking questions and wrestling with things as an adult and with adult experiences and with sort of a different kind of a complexity, Judaism feels like it's something that is for kids. So I have found that happens a lot, that when people don't wrestle with it as an adult, but more have a default because of what they were raised with as children, that sometimes there's less of an excitement to do that wrestling because there hasn't been a sense of its relevance as an adult. Whereas when you come to it as an adult, right, already you skip over the training wheels, and it's a very different kind of relationship. And again, it's an overgeneralization. That's not the truth for everybody. But I do think that there's that for some there's a sense that this is what kids do, this is what we do with our kids. But what is the significance and the relevance as adults? That's something that not everybody wrestles with. And I'll put that on the responsibility of the organized, institutionalized Jewish community as well, that we need to inspire a different kind of a desire to wrestle as adults.
I'll make it quick, thank you. I was just curious if you could reflect on your opinion on the, I believe it's a rule among most of the major rabbinical schools at UCGTS, that, if I'm understanding correctly, if you're a student there or applying as a student there, that you cannot have a partner of another faith. Yeah, I was just wondering, and I know HUC is one of them. I was wondering if you could great on that. I don't know how you feel about that.
It's a great question. It's a great challenge, and one that even within the HUC circles, that is sometimes difficult for people to wrestle with. So I look at this from a very personal perspective, which is, right, in a lot of ways that's what we've been talking about today, right, in terms of a personal perspective. When I decided to go to rabbinical school, I was already engaged to be married. And I told my spouse, or my fiance at the time, this isn't just a decision about me, because this will affect your entire life. This affects your relationship with your community. It affects your relationship with Judaism and your ability to go into a Jewish space and be able to be there and be anonymous. That this is going to affect a lot of who you are in the community. And thankfully for us all, he was on board. But I think that in the roles that we are in, especially as in congregational life, that it winds up being, for better or worse, it winds up being that the family on the whole winds up being a significant part of the community. It is not difficult. I do not make it difficult if you want to decide to convert to Judaism. I don't turn people away 3 times, right? I try to recognize that there is learning that has to be done, and a lot of it to me is about identity and seeing yourself as a part of the we of Judaism. That it's something that is, it takes time and it's a process, and it's something that is very, very accessible. So I do feel that if you are going to be a part of the role of the community in that way, that it makes sense that you want to be all in. So I actually do think that, it's difficult, and I don't know if it'll always stay that way as it is, but I do think that it makes sense that partners be Jewish as well. When we go to the synagogue, my congregants watch how he parents, right? They watch whether or not he knows the words to things. There's all those kinds of things. I think that it's kind of a whole family thing.
Maybe one more question? Dig deep.
That's not here.
Well, mine's not really a deep question. It's kind of ridiculous if I think about it. Going back to your first question, I'm sorry, what's your name, dude? Ben? Oh, okay, nice to meet you, Ben. You're talking about how the 2 festivals kind of collided or were on the same night, and you had what was it called again?
It was the Autumn Moon Festival in Sukkot.
Oh, did you have the cookie? What was it?
With green tea filling.
It was a fusion of multiple kinds of things at that point.
That got me thinking about how culture is such there's so many different aspects of culture. It's the language, it's it's how people practice. Also, there's a lot of food too involved in culture. I know with myself, I grew up with a lot of Mexican food. I'm pretty sure anyone else can say they grew up with a lot of other types of food. Would you say there was a lot of mixture of both Chinese and Jewish cuisines when you were growing up, or anything like that?
Like in my home?
Yeah, and more homemade stuff.
Yeah. So cuisine is interesting. My mom was the person who primarily did the cooking. So we never had banquets at home on a regular basis. Sometimes people imagine that we did. So, but it's a Chinese style of cooking. My father didn't do a lot of his cooking, and he didn't cook a lot at the home that he grew up in either. So we didn't actually have a lot of specific recipes and things like that from the Jewish side. Plus a lot of things that are considered Jewish food in some ways, borscht or those kinds of things. He had no relationship to, because his family was from Western Europe and came over to a totally different kind of a reference point. That's in terms of. But one thing that is always important to me to point out is that we didn't blend stuff to make it. We can do both side by side, and I love the idea of eating the mooncake in the sukkah. We didn't have fortune cookies instead of hamantash, and we didn't have those kinds of things. There were some traditional kinds of foods that we eat side by side, but didn't wanted to preserve the significant aspects of both of them, and so it was to change them so that they didn't ultimately do that supporting the tradition that they came from. Does that make sense?
Oh Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, it was kind of a ridiculous question. Anyone else want to ask like more serious question? Oh, okay.
I actually think food is a big deal, right? And I actually think when we think about ourselves as Ashkenazi Jews, one of the things is that, you know, in the old country, Ashkenazi Jews didn't eat falafel, right? But as American Jews, like that's a piece of our culture here, right? So to me, I'm like, that's one great example of how we are significantly different already when we're here, because it's right, the things that we eat and the way, and that's just one example, right? There's many of them, but it becomes a different tradition.
So I know there's a couple Jewish holidays this weekend. I'm wondering how we can get involved with your synagogue specifically.
What a fantastic question. If you want to see me after, I'm happy to give you a card. We have a, so the way that I see the high holidays is there's 4 holidays, even though we kind of focus a lot on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah, we think about like what do we want for this year for ourselves. Yom Kippur, we think about what do we need to change about ourselves in some ways to be able to achieve those things. Sukkot, which is the holiday that we're celebrating now, is just all happy, right? Like, you know, just it's traditionally a harvest holiday, and when you bring in the harvest, good harvest, bad harvest, there's nothing you can do about it now, so you might as well enjoy it, right? So it's that kind of sense, like we've gone through, you know, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur at this point, like there's times for change, it's not now. Now let's be grateful for what we have and for the people in our lives and for the things that we can enjoy, for the mysteries of the universe, you know, as we sleep outside and look at the stars. Simchat Torah, which is the last one that's going to start on Sunday night, is to me a celebration of the tradition that enables us to do all of the other 3 as well. So we dance with the Torah and roll the Torah back from the very end to the very beginning. So we are going to have services on Sunday night. Where we also have a special blessing for the students who are starting religious school for the first time. And, you know, we dance with the Torahs and we roll the whole thing out, and the cantor has to read the last few lines, and then in the same breath read the first few lines so it's completely uninterrupted. It's a lot of fun, so I'm happy to give you a card and tell you where we are and for you to join us. That would be great.
Great.